General Valery Gerasimov, the current head of state of the Armed Forces of Russia, defined hybrid methods as the use of a set of non-military measures, political, economic measures, that based on military forces. Historically, wars have developed in conventional spaces, land, air, naval, and spatial. In the last decades, as of the exponential modernization of the communication and information systems, a new confrontations war system have arisen, some called the fifth domain of war. And this is the cyberspace. And even if this could sound abstract, it is not at all. It is another type of weapons with a high speed, according to Amos Jarding, Israeli general. They protect their own and destroy the others. It is able to destroy the real world physically, or informatics. Cyber attacks, the other way of making war. This is our critical move today. We will look at events and actors involved. To start analyzing the topic, we must consider Venezuela because of the magnitude and time. What happened in this time is recent. Since March 7, it confronted three massive interruptions, massive general scale, and many more at minimal scale of the electricity that affected the entire country. After investigations, authorities accused that it was a cybernetic attack to the automatized control of hydroelectric plant Simon Bolivar that generates more than 80% of the national electricity. This is the most brutal aggression against Venezuela in the latest 200 years, according to President Nicolás Maduro, who also said, "We have cut the strategy by the root, and we have found that the brain and body of the plant had been damaged." I can only say this came from Houston and Chicago. This was made from two U.S. cities against our telecommunication system, against Internet. A persecution against Venezuela ordered by the Pentagon, by the Southern Command. I have appointed a presidential research committee for this cyber attack. And I've asked the incorporation of international specialists, and I would ask the support of United Nations. I will also ask for the active support of Russia, China, Iran, Cuba, countries that have great experience in defense against cyber attacks. Let's review in our home, telesurtv.net, an article written by Germán Gorais Lopez, published in March 2017, called United States-Russia, Cybernetic War. He mentions this book between two ages. In 1971, Brzezinski, then Minister of Carter, called about an elite through the manipulation, cybernetic manipulation, and stated that there will be a society controlled more by an elite, and soon it will be possible almost continuous surveillance upon each citizen and keep complete records containing even more personal information on each citizen. These files will be easily recovered by authorities. This is interesting, and this is what is happening now. In Misión Verdad, after this Venezuelan junta, he titled Electromagnetic Attack Against the Electric System. The study and analysis of disruptive effects through an electromagnetic attack, EMT, that's able to interrupt the electric system of any state for a long time. This is due to interconnectivity of computerized infrastructure. I now go to our recommendation, which is an article published by Voltaire Network in 2011. For you to see, this is not a new topic. Cybernetics, the new threat. This is a Mexican author, Miguel Badino. Cybernetic war, the new threat.
Se anunciaba este nuevo concepto estratégico, el de guerra cibernética.
The new strategic war was announced for the security of nation and international threats that could affect its interest. In general, it says that NATO will be able to act in any place of the world where it considers that its security is threatened beyond the geographic limits of its member countries. In that summit, NATO talked about 7 threats: international guerrilla, massive weapons, natural catastrophes, organized crimes, and economic financial crimes, and others. What has happened with this NATO classification? We learned cyber war. Could this be used at convenience if other countries other than the United States or France develop these kind of weapons? If there is the action-reaction principle takes place, what would happen according to NATO? We will also analyze this. Forbes magazine, a magazine specialized in business, on March 9, regarding Venezuelan situation, published, could the Venezuelan outage be a cybernetic attack? We go with Jorge Gestoso in Washington, D.C. Thank you very much. A collaborator of Forbes magazine called Caleb Litterum stated, and I read textually, that it's realistic to think that the U.S. government launch a cybernetic attack against the Guri hydroelectric complex, which caused the outage in Venezuela. And he continues interrupting energy and water provision, interfere in the internet access, causing chaos in the daily lives, and even nuclear plants, as the case may be, are all topics that are more increasingly discussed in the national security communities in the United States as legitimate and legal causes to undermine a foreign state. And on Tuesday, that is yesterday, WikiLeaks published a tweet that textually says, "Consultant Canvas, supported by the United States, seeks to overthrow governments and analyze how to overthrow Chavez." So this comes from 2001. By even exploiting outages, it says, and continues quoting, "It is possibly this what would have the impact of unifying riots in a way that no opponent group will never achieve." This is added to a textual quote that says, "Make the economy cry until it dies of pain." And this is what it asked by overthrowing Allende by Richard Nixon. Now we go back with you. Thank you, Jorge. Very interesting. We will also take this to deepen and analyze with our guests. From Caracas, the epicenter of the last events, Rolando Segura adds more data. Rolando, the consequences of this kind of fact are so important that they affect the common of people. Isn't it so? Yes, Lucia. On these days, we have been witness on March 7 of the consequences of an outage of the so-called blackout operation against Venezuela. Several days after this total outage in the South American nation, they are still felt in aspects like water, energy supply, fuel, transportation, and also distribution of food. This is why the Bolivarian government has defined 3 essential axes to cover the contingency. And in the first place is regularize the water supply. They are pumping through machines at all points of the countries, said the ministry, the corresponding ministry, and informed that water is arriving to the low part of cities like Caracas, which is a valley. First it arrives to the low zones, and then it arrives to different points of the map. In a second place, we also have transportation. A contingency plan was created to serve transportation for the people, even if in these days school activities have been suspended. Conditions were created for people to and served with metro buses to transport people in replacement of the subway until it is fully restored, after the high-tension lines are ready to support. And finally, a third point that the government has given priority to is food supply, and one of the alternative plans for this has been to intensify the delivery that once per month the local supply and production committees perform, and we have seen this through our teams deployed in different points in the Venezuelan capital that have started these deliveries, but undoubtedly in these days all the Venezuelan population has suffered the effects of especially the daily this massive outage and telecommunications, for which it was very difficult to connect to internet, but also have direct communications through mobile or fixed telephony. In any case, President Nicolás Maduro has pointed out that he celebrated as a victory that the country has been electricity has been reinstated in other country, and also appointed an investigation commission on this fact, and invited international organizations like UN and countries like China, Russia, Cuba, and Iran. The Chinese spokesman said that his country is willing to provide all collaboration required for Venezuela to replace energy provision. Thank you, Rolando, for these data. This was our correspondent, Rolando Segura. After this cybernetic operation that President described in the last days, as of March 7, cybernetics is something abstract and unknown by many because of the encrypted language and dark, as somebody called it, but it has the capacity of affecting the daily physical, real life of the people. So we wonder, even if the strongest are vulnerable to these kinds of attacks and spionage, how can these states and the city protect themselves? We will continue talking after this pause. Russian news agency Sputnik last December 13 published it would be a total war. Will there be a crisis in the Caribbean cybernetic space? The Central of Global Programs of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Orlov, said that when the network is blocked and large sections of internet social networks are completely blocked, a normal user will notice and will be involved in a war. But this would even be the softest scenario, said the interviewee. And in his opinion, an expert in cyberspace, the United States should be interested in talking, resolving, and preventing. What happens there? But probably any agreement is aligned to Republican ideology. They are convinced of their capacity of dictating conditions, terms, concealed operations, as Snowden told us. But at this time, they think, why should we do it? It's better that we don't have our hands tied and act as what we want. He's talking about the possibility of regulating by the United States. We have that article there, cyber attacks, the other way of making war. Communication technologies and especially ecosystem of social networks and browsers is a scenario of strategic domination, especially United Nations and the United States have become vehicles for permanent surveillance of data information. Nowadays, 5 firms, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, and Amazon, have more than 90% of the virtual network. In 2007, half of Internet traffic had 17 dispersed sites around the world. 7 years later, 2014, that figure was focused in 35 companies. In barely 5 years, these companies were reduced to 20, and the power of the great firms that command Internet and information technologies are powerful. The executives of Google, Facebook, and Amazon funded Barack Obama's campaign. But in 2012 and 2013, Google had more than 30 meetings in the White House. Jimmy, Android, Chrome, Macs, Google Play, and Google Drive has more than 1 billion active users per month. 15% of the world population is using some of its product at this time. This means that they have personal information like tastes, consumer decisions that each individual naively enters in the network. They warn that Google is the only company that has enough real-time data. I would like to add analysis. I will now connect with Dr. Lajos León Borja from Puerto Rico, the Interamerican University of Puerto Rico, the expert in defense, military defense, international topics. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you. We're talking about the doctrine and cybernetic manipulation, or Big Brother. I would like you to help us review history, how it came out, and who are responsible, and if the technical capacity is limited, and what dangers are there for humanity. Well, undoubtedly, the inventors of Internet, the United States, have been experts in using it as espionage method. We know the declarations made by U.S. dissident Edward Snowden about the CIA works that spied on their U.S. citizens, if not directly through allied spionage agencies from the United States or Canada. The PEER NSA spied on U.S. citizens in times of George W. Bush. So they could say that if it's illegal to spy on U.S. citizens, they could do it to foreign citizens. So Canadian agency did that, and probably the British one, the Global Network headquarters, also, that spied on U.S. citizens. And other allies, which is the most serious. Dilma Rousseff, president of Brazil, was spied. Angela Merkel as well. Numerous allies, but since it's a world network, they potentially can spy upon all the world, because it's not only the United States. It's an alliance called the Five Eyes, if I'm not mistaken, which are the intelligence services that spy on all communications, telephone, internet, radio, TV, everything related to the media in the electromagnetic spectrum, and we could also talk about fiber optics, and the U.S., Canadian, British, Australian, and New Zealand agencies, plus Israel, because I think that according to Snowden, all that is collected by these five allies are shared, and everything shared by the other four allied of the United States are shared with NSA, and they receive from other allies, and all this is shared with Israel. So Israel receives information from all the world, and they only share whatever they want with the United States. But in view of the last events in Venezuela, I would like to add that potentially a cybernetic war is taking place. And when we talk about cybernetic war, it's an internet, computer war, informatic network war, which would be one of the 6 dimensions of modern war. One is land, air, navy, electronic, spatial, cybernetic war. And I can think that when President Nicolás Maduro, at the beginning of this political crisis, which is now international, in January he said that Venezuelan militaries were receiving messages issued, it seemed, from Colombia. He didn't talk about what kind of messages, but it was probably psychological war to promise them everything, just as long as they resign to their faithfulness to Nicolás Maduro and go to the opposition. Desert, basically. This already happened. The United States launched emails or it's in social networks. I think Nicolás Maduro talked about WhatsApp to emails of armed forces officials or police officials and promised them that they will be economically compensated if they leave Maduro. They did this against Saddam Hussein in 2003, the United States against Gaddafi in 2011, against the military, and against the Arab-Syrian war as of 2011. And what they usually do, for example, in a platform, it would be the Hercules 130 aircraft, EC-130J solo command that is devoted to psychological and propaganda war, and acts in AM/FM frequency, but television, but could also ultimately send emails to some given individuals, not to everyone. And the idea would be for the Bolivarian armed forces rise against the government of Venezuela and go to the other band. So here you have an example of cybernetic war through internet, emails and social networks, WhatsApp, but for military purposes. And another thing that could very possibly happen with the outage of this March 7, that could have been a product of cybernetic attack. Who would be the author? United States, which is one of the great powers in cybernetic war. Others are Israel, Russia, China, and Korea that we know of. We must not doubt UK, Germany, France as well, and the list could be too long. But in the case of Venezuela, presumably it would be the United States, because they are experts and have been working on cybernetic war, and an example of what a cybernetic attack was given to leave millions of people without electricity. Allegedly, it was an accident in 2003. According to open sources, 45 million in August 2003 in the United States, including New York, were left without electricity, as well as 10 million people in Ontario, Canada. Officially, it is recognized as a mistake of computer program in an electric company in Akron, Ohio, and had a domino effect and affected all the electric firms of this area. At this time, they said it was an accident. We really don't know, because the United States was living the hysteria of 9/11, and we don't know if these people tested in their own territory and what would happen if they launched something. So even if it was truly an accident, which I doubt in 2003, what happened in Venezuela was so long ago that I'm sure they're masters in those types of attacks. I can see other types of viruses, Stuxnet, that infected thousands of centrifuges in the Iranian Nuclear Scientific Investigation Center, and around 20% of those 1,000 centrifuges were destroyed with a worm to a pen drive that was infected. A scientist that ignored that his pen drive was infected plugged it into one of the computers, and the worm went on. So here we have examples of cyber war that could have affected Venezuela. But we could talk about more, because we also can talk about electronic war with electromagnetic pulses from aircraft without pilots to cause short circuits, permanent damage, and extend outages. Now, Professor, do you see the possibility that how broadly developed this area could be confronted in the cyberspace, or as they could appear in the spaces of war? Undoubtedly, because I'll give you another example. In the advanced decade, the Air Force's secret program called Big Safari, that with the assistance of British company BAE Systems, the ancient British Air Systems, issued a signal through an airplane. These could be combat aircraft that eliminate the defense of the enemy to reach the targets in the enemy country. And they could issue this malicious algorithm. There were three versions. The primitive allowed the enemy that launches the virus to infect the combat computer of in an equipment of the adversary, and the enemy could see it. The version Sutinus allowed the attacker and administrator and take control over the defense radar of the enemy. And they said that they used in September 2007 against what they say that it was an investigation reactor. And they said they used the virus for the Syrian radar antennas that were Russia turned to the inside and did not notice the Israeli attack that came from three. And the third vision around 2006 and 2007 allowed the system administrator and control in mobile missiles, tactic and ballistic, and also mobile launchers of anti-air launchers, missiles. At this time, it should be much more sophisticated, because in the future war, we could make useless aircraft of the enemy without even shooting, just by launching a virus that destroys the system. Professor Laios, thank you very much for your opinion and for sharing it with our audience. So we had our guest here. We would take what Jorge Gestoso was talking about. He also referred to President Maduro, as we did, which is included in Forbes magazine. This man, Litalo, who says that the outage power at peak hours is truly consistent in a traditional operation. At the time of interruption of this kind, in times of social riots that legitimize the government, is an alternative that is ready. Truly, it's one of the tactics described in its 2015 report. It will seem that we're talking about the proliferation of an apparently uncontrollable network, and we also have to talk about technological levels and the monopoly of these media. Our guest, we will present our guest after this pause. Cyber attacks, the other way of making war. This is our critical move today. The Guardian informed that the NSA had surveyed communications of 35 presidents around the world. The control of mobile phone of Angela Merkel was emblematic from 2012 to 2010. The former agent of this agency, Edward Snowden, said that it interfered 70.3 million of communications between France between the end of 2012 and early 2013, and the collection techniques of RT-Box and White Box. We will continue adding that, fake news, discrimination, racism. All this characterizes this so-called virtual world. Microsoft was founded in 1975 by Bill Gates and Al in Washington. At this time, there are 400 million equipment in 192 countries and 200 million people using it. In 2008, the General Court of the European Union imposed a penalty against Microsoft, and it was Snowden who declared this. Facebook has millions of users, a third in the planet, and this is the main social network visited in the world. In the rest of the map, we have Google, except in China, where the absolute protagonism is Baidu. In Russia, Yandex, and in Japan, Yahoo still reigns. WhatsApp has another place, and it's growing. All this is around 400 million interactions. In the last campaign, Facebook was accused of multiplying fake news and isolate from the rest. The social network was reported to be discriminating and excluding. In 2017, it was believed that it allowed to rent houses only to white people and excluding Afro people because they were less attractive purchasers. These investigations allowed to discover segmented markets. After this report, the company eliminated anti-Semitic categories. In the study, we have Jack Bravo, master's degree in Latin American economy, expert in digital communication, and also peer. Hi, Jack. Thank you, Lucia. Jack, after listening to what we were broadcasting, where we ask about democracy, rights, and freedom, what happens with these concepts in a network that I called apparently uncontrollable? We must stay with the concept of digital society, society of knowledge, and everything that technology moves in society, our behavior and power. Communication, information through internet, we must not forget that internet was born as a military project in order to have communication in military projects. What happened? It went through the society to the point that what we lived in Venezuela has a clear indicator how internet makes us vulnerable. Not only empower us with information, but also there are some flaws there. For example, when we talk about influence of bubbles, how information is segmented. It happens in the United States where they don't contrast information and users only have access to the information that these large platforms want to distribute. So this is a double standard. Yes, we can't talk about full liberty, especially because it's uncontrollable. It even turns a security system in each nation. How about, is this a priority for politicians and experts in security and defense, whether of states or citizens, to address this matter? Do you think that politicians and experts in this area are developing mechanisms of defense? This could even be a cross-cutting topic. What is supranationality? Because it also has to do with sovereignty of each nation. I just read that scale systems are not new. That what happened in Venezuela is called terrorism because of the implications they want to achieve. Now, what happens with Internet? Because of the position of social networks, Internet is in a way of doing politics. How did Bolsonaro, Donald Trump reach power? It is these great empires that are dynamizing behind a web. It's like nuclear energy. It is there whether for Pacific or war purposes. But nuclear dismantling will not arrive because it's a topic of security of these empires. They were talking, the great powers have to ask permission to the United States to filter to this NSA agency and how this information reaches Israel, and not only Israel but Zionism and what it can do in the Middle East, and now Venezuela. You were talking about SCADA system, which is the Simon Bolivar plant's system. It's a system used around the world. It blends cybernetics and also human intervention and interfaces that can be managed through remotely, but the vulnerability there is Internet. What can we do in view of vulnerability? How can citizens and states defend themselves? There's something. Is there any legislation? Is this convenient to the United States? In fact, the United States recently kicked the table with cyber attacks because Donald Trump licensed hackers in defense of the United States to use these weapons and pointing at Russia as its main enemy, of course. And something we cannot forget is the case of Huawei, with the alleged data filtration, because it's a matter of competition. China and Russia's innovation influence versus U.S. technological fall. The thing is that the United States is projecting towards war technology. This means less physical risks, and everything is made remotely. Drones, for example, cyber terrorism now vulners the defenses of each state. And there's the deep web we were talking about, the secret region that operates under the official network and allows hackers, terrorists, informatic pirates infiltrate. It's like the warlord in these digital surroundings. There are some emblematic cases in the world about cyber attacks. For example, when we investigated, we found that what happened with TV Saint-Monde in France 2015, this chain was completely outed suddenly by hackers that allegedly were members of Islamic State, or the so-called Islamic State, and suddenly they took control of networks, broadcasting ended, and losses were millionaires in euros. Could Venezuela be included in this list? Yes, it is tacit. President Nicolás Maduro said that they had identified Chicago and Houston. The authorship is appealing to international law. Transparency is being made in investigations. President Maduro talked about the participation of experts from UN, Russia, Cuba, North Korea, and even China. What is happening? Of course, the United States will not say it is the author, because they want to remain with this double standards they have. But at our lights, Elliot Abrams, John Bolton have said that everything is on the table to end Venezuela and its government, and that all options are on the table. over the table. The use of new war military technologies, how, with the least effort of troops, because this includes budgets. Now the situation in the United States regarding Congress and Senate with Mr. Donald Trump is not nice for his intervention plans, because everything aims to a military intervention. Fortunately, there are hackers and professional people in Venezuela. The fact of Chavez using free software. Now, to avoid this, we should cut communications outside, but for this, we have to develop our own telecommunications like China, or like Iran did against the attack to nuclear stations. This is interesting, scarce effort, and I thank you very much. Definitely, we will approach these definitions to common citizens. The security of nations is threatened by cybernetic operations, simple or sophisticated operations that in seconds could leave cities without utilities, water, electricity, as happened in Venezuela. And as Jack said, Internet is such a magnitude that it could be oxygen in the case of the waste of conventional war. And we should see social networks as a new way of informing and doing politics. And of course, risks increase from uncertainty and doubt. About who and from where these cybernetic unconventional weapons are used, if terrorists are following instructions of the states or of whom. These are doubts that we must clarify and that increase risks. We must approach these concepts to the citizens. We have ended our critical move today. Thank you for being here.